You're listening to the Mommy Labor Nurse Podcast, episode number 59. Hey guys, happy Monday and happy last episode of 2020. We are about to wrap this crazy year up. So this episode is pretty cool. If you tuned in last week, I talked about it at the very end of the episode last week, what I was planning on doing this week. So this week I have my own mom coming on the podcast to talk about when she had me and when she had my sister. So it was three of us got on a little Zoom call and we recorded this week's episode. So I didn't say this in the episode. Maybe I should have. Maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. But actually, I feel like probably one of the reasons why I became a labor and delivery nurse in the first place was because my mom talked so highly of the labor and delivery nurses who took care of her while she was pregnant, when she was having me and when she was having my sister. So that's just kind of a cool little tidbit. Obviously, if it wasn't for my mom and my dad, I wouldn't be here and Mommy Labor Nurse wouldn't be here. So my mom is a very special, cool person because of that sole reason. But yeah, I think that if she hadn't had the experiences that she had and she hadn't had just talked to me a whole lot about her birth experiences through my life growing up, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't have been a labor and delivery nurse. So we talked about my birth first because I'm older than my sister. Those of you who don't know that fact, but my sister and I are about 7 years apart. So she started talking about me first and her pregnancy with me and then her birth. And then we talked about Jenna and her pregnancy with Jenna and her birth with Jenna and how different they were. So my pregnancy was very, very difficult, and she had a lot of complications during the pregnancy. And then when labor came around, she ended up having a C-section with me. With Jenna, with my sister, it was the complete opposite. Very, very easy pregnancy and very easy, quick vaginal birth. So it's just cool. I've been meaning to do this, to sit down with my mom and my sister and record this episode and talk about these stories. And yeah, what better way to do it than do it on the podcast? So let's get into it.
You're listening to the Mommy Labor Nurse Podcast, where we firmly believe in the power of education when it comes to giving birth. Tune in each week as we dive into pregnancy-related topics, expert interviews, and a variety of birth stories. As a reminder, anything you hear on this podcast is not medical advice. Please see mommylabornurse.com/disclaimer for more details. And now, here's your host, educator, registered nurse, and fellow mom, Liesel Teen.
Hi, Jenna and Mom. Welcome to the Mommy Labor Nurse Podcast. Thank you guys so much for being here today.
Hey.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. All right. So Jenna has been on the Mommy Labor Nurse Podcast a few times. How many times, Jenna? Twice? I guess.
I'd say twice. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess we did the pregnancy episode and then we did our podcast or the postpartum episode.
Right.
So Jenna's been on here, but we have a new guest on here. My mom is going to be on the podcast today, guys. At the end of last week's episode, I told you guys that this was going to be an episode to kind of close out the year, an idea that I kind of got and have been saving and wanted to do to kind of wrap up 2020. So today we are going to do a birth story, and we're going to talk about my birth when I was born with my mom and when my sister was born. So fun fact, my mom had two different types. So she had a C-section with me and she had a vaginal birth with my sister. Very different pregnancies, very different deliveries. So we're going to go through both. But Mom, I always ask people to introduce themselves in the beginning. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell everybody, what your name is, where you're from, what you do, and what you like to do for, I don't know, hobbies and stuff. So go ahead.
Okay, my name is Sharon Heinzelman. I'm currently from North Carolina, originally from New Jersey. Right now, my husband and I own rental properties and renovate them, and that's what we do for a living. In the past, I did tech support for software companies and stuff. And let's see, what do I do for fun? I play with my grandchildren and
Walter,
Jenna's cats.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what you do for fun. All right, cool. All right, Mom. So this is going to be, very informal going through. What I usually tell people to do is to start at the very beginning. So we're going to go back before I was even around, and I want you to tell me what, if you had any issues getting pregnant with me and how that experience was. Then getting pregnant, first trimester, second trimester, third trimester. So let's jump it way, way back. First of all, how old were you when you had me?
Okay. Well, we were married in 1984. Okay. I was 25 at the time.
Okay.
I originally got pregnant, I guess, in 1987, I guess. And that was actually, I hadn't been trying to get pregnant until that, luckily, I got pregnant right away. We had been renovating our house at the time, so I didn't want to bring a new baby into a construction area. Yeah. So I got pregnant. I'm trying to remember. It must have been just after the first of the year, and I miscarried. One morning, I know it was Easter weekend because Oma, your grandmother, was visiting us in New Jersey, and she was just about to leave to drive back to North Carolina. And in the middle of the night, I woke up in a pool of blood, and I had to go to the hospital, and obviously I had lost the baby. So that was our first pregnancy, and then of course you're not allowed to, try to get pregnant for a couple of months. So,
and do you remember how many weeks you were?
I think I was about 8 weeks at that time.
8 weeks. Okay.
Yeah. And I didn't know the sex of the baby. And I never found out afterwards any of that. And I probably wouldn't have wanted to know. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe I would have. I don't know. But, things were different back in those days too. So, yeah. So I miscarried that baby. And so we didn't try for a while. And I think we actually were renovating our first rental property at that time. So we kind of delayed a little bit more because, again, I didn't want to try to get pregnant while I was doing construction and painting and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then, again, we tried to get pregnant, and I got pregnant right away.
Okay. So first month, no issues?
Yeah. First month we stopped using birth control. So I got pregnant right away, and, but again, had problems. And, I've told you many times before, I really almost lost you several times.
Yeah. Okay, wait, hold on. Go back. So I don't know that I even know this, but how, when you first found out you were pregnant, what did you do? Did you did you and Dad take the test together, or did you take it and then tell Dad, or what was that experience? I don't even think I've asked.
Well,
remember?
Yeah. Do I remember? Honestly, I guess we weren't really doing the, what's the basal thermometer then, because we had gotten pregnant right away. So we were okay with that. But yeah, I knew when I was ovulating, and, so I would take my test, and, he was like, okay, well, what does it say? That kind of thing. So, he was part of it all along, of course, and so, we were thrilled because we really wanted a baby, and had waited a couple of years, but we both loved children, and we both wanted a baby so badly. So, and had lost our first one. Yeah. So, we, were thrilled. Well, but then again, and I think I got pregnant with you it was around November sometime. Okay. I think it was November, because we were supposed to come to North Carolina. And it's funny because I hadn't told anybody at my job at the time. I was working at Johnson & Johnson at the time. I hadn't told them the first pregnancy when I lost the baby, so they knew nothing about that. And I didn't tell them the second pregnancy either because, first of all, I was afraid of losing, you kind of are afraid that something's going to happen again. You're a little suspicious about things. But it was the day before Christmas break. It was the last day of working at work, and we were going to have our Christmas holiday. And I started bleeding again. Oh. So my poor boss, I went into him and I said to him, Tom, okay, I never told you, but I miscarried one baby and I'm bleeding with the second baby and I have to go to the hospital right now and I have to leave. And he was panicking, do you want me to drive you? What should I do? I was just, it's fine. I'm going to the hospital right now. I'm going to meet my husband at the hospital, and I was pretty calm, and I drove to the hospital, and Daddy met me there, and I was bleeding again. But they put me on bed rest for a couple of days, and we were actually supposed to fly to North Carolina to see Oma.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, Linda was there too, and we were going to fly down and spend the holiday together. And we couldn't go; we had to stay home because they didn't want me to get on a plane. But I mean, it resolved itself, and it was fine. And then I think I must have had one or two more bleeding episodes. I had a lot of different bleeding episodes. But then when I was 7 months pregnant, I actually had another serious bleeding episode, and apparently I couldn't feel the contractions, but apparently contractions had started.
Okay. So
I went to the hospital, and, my gynecologist basically said, okay, we're going to keep you in the hospital for a couple of days. We're going to put you on breathine. Okay. Mm-hmm. So they did that. They put me on breathine, and I guess the contractions, they had gotten it under control enough that I could go home, and I was on bed rest. So for the last 6 weeks of my pregnancy, from about 7 months to about 8.5 months, mm-hmm. I was on bed rest. Mm-hmm. And at the time we lived in a 2-story home. You don't remember that house, that you were really little. Do you remember that house in New Jersey?
I think, wait, is it the same house? Like, is it the last house that we lived in before?
Yeah, the one that we lived in, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of remember it, but I barely do. I wanted to ask you, though, before you go into that, into the whole bed rest thing. So, going back to when you had the bleeding episodes in the first trimester, you said they were kind of all in the first trimester, right?
No, I had bleeding episodes. Yeah, I had that one in the first trimester. Then I got past it, and it was okay. And it wasn't like I was taking anything for it. I mean, I was still working. It wasn't like I was on bed rest or anything. Yeah, I was still working and all of that. But I did have other episodes where I'd spot a little. But then the serious one was when I was 7 months pregnant.
And when you would have these bleeding episodes, were they doing ultrasounds and like saying, okay, like, did they ever figure out was it coming from the placenta, or like, did they ever figure out exactly why?
No, no, I don't think so. No. Mm-mm. And I mean, it wasn't like, they never said that, and they never saw anything wrong. I mean, certainly I had ultrasounds, throughout the pregnancy, but they didn't see anything wrong with you. They didn't see anything wrong with the baby.
Yeah.
Everything seemed to be okay, but no, they never really gave me a reason for the bleeding episodes.
Interesting. See, now I wonder, I mean, I've looked at ultrasounds from when I was born, and I mean, it's like you can't barely even see anything. So I wonder if like just the technology has gotten better, that they're able to visualize stuff better.
I'm sure the technology has gotten better, and I'm sure that, things are just different. They know a little more about things than they did before. Or
do you think that they maybe knew and they didn't like fully tell you, or did he just flat out say, we don't know what's going on?
Honestly, I don't remember. I mean, I had wonderful doctors. I loved these guys. It was a group in Mount Holly, New Jersey, and they were wonderful doctors, and they were, I don't think they would have kept it from me. They were very open with me, and were very supportive. I mean, they were real sweet guys. I mean, after my first miscarriage, or when I miscarried, I literally was in the doctor's office because I had to go to the follow-up appointment. And I broke down and was crying, here I'm in a doctor's office with all these pregnant women, or women who had just had babies, and I lost my baby. So, of course, you're trying to, hold the tears in. I got into the doctor's office and I just started bawling. And he was the sweetest guy. He's, hugging me and saying, you'll be fine. You're going to have a healthy baby. Yeah. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. And then, like I said, then when I started having bleeding episodes with the pregnancy with you, I mean, I was like, oh my goodness, am I not going to be able to have a child? That was really a fear. And, I tend to be so much like my mother in so many ways, and my mother never had any problems. She had 5 children and never had any problems. So no miscarriages,
you probably had a lot of doubts.
Yeah, sure. So,
well, I mean, I think that is good to say too, and to recognize for people to recognize that, like, what you just said, about going in and there's all these pregnant women around you, people who just had babies, postpartum babies. But there are people who come in and miscarriages happen every single day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah. But all right, well, let's jump forward. You said to 7 months, something significant happened and you started to bleed more.
Right.
Was that just a lot more blood, or was it more red blood, or was it like what?
Yeah, and did it hurt whenever it happened?
No, I don't really remember feeling contractions. That's one I was surprised when they told me I was having contractions, because it's not like I vaguely kind of remember a little bit Braxton Hicks, but I don't even remember that so much, So no, there was no pain. It's not like I was in active labor. Yeah. It's just obviously, they put the Belter on you and they're measuring contractions. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah. And it's odd because when we talk about bleeding during pregnancy, there's really only a handful of things that can kind of happen. And it's usually either cervical bleeding from your cervix, because your cervix is very vascular and can bleed a lot, or it's from the placenta in some way. There's a couple different ways that the placenta can bleed. But one of the most common reasons is called a previa, which is where the placenta is very close to or covering the cervix, and it has a tendency to bleed that is not painful at all, but it's just, it just bleeds. But you can see that very well on that ultrasound. So that's why I'm wondering.
Oh, that's interesting, because you're right. I mean, the technology today, it's just, when I saw, your ultrasound photos compared to the ones I have from you guys, it's like, night and day.
But I would think in 1989, they would at least, I can Google it and see when they're able to tell where a placenta is on an ultrasound.
Right.
I don't know how the technology was back then, but I would think that they would be able to. So maybe it wasn't a previa. Maybe it was something else that another reason could be like what we call a placental abruption, where it's like peeling off of the uterus a little bit and bleeding a little bit, and sometimes that can be detrimental and dangerous to baby because it's tearing off of the uterus, and that's where they're getting all their blood supply. But sometimes it's only a minor abruption and it's not dangerous to baby at all. So that could have been what's going on. It's interesting that they just didn't really know, or couldn't really tell. So all right. So you said yes. So 7 months they put you on breathine, which is terbutaline. Same thing. We actually still use that, but we don't use it for what they used to use it for, because we use it occasionally in labor if somebody's having contractions like back to back to back to back to back, and it's a little bit too, like, we want them to be spaced out a little bit because it's stressing out baby.
Okay.
But we don't use it for preterm labor anymore because it has been shown to have it can cause like heart issues for mom.
Yeah, that I do remember. The heart flutters. Yeah, your heart beating. Yeah, the palpitations.
Right.
Yes.
So they put you on breathing.
Right. And bed rest. I was on bed rest. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we lived in a 2-story house, so Daddy would get me a cooler full of food in the morning, bring it up, and I would eat from that all day. And the bathroom was up there, so I didn't have to go up and down stairs. So we did that for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And then they took me off the breathing, and literally a week later, you were born to the day.
Wow.
So, but yeah, and that was a tough birth. That was a real tough birth. It's funny because I looked it up. I didn't remember. I was in labor for 19 and a half hours and pushed for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
But my pelvis never opened up. And so, you were all the way down on the birth canal and you weren't coming out. There was just no way. So I ended up having a cesarean.
Yeah. All right. So let's dive into that birth. So when you got taken off the breathing, the medication, did they say you're okay, you don't have to be on bed rest anymore, or were you
Yes, they did. Okay. They said I was okay, and that now if you were to be born, it would be fine because you were 8.5 months. Gotcha. So so your lungs had progressed enough that you could be born.
So it sounds like you were like 36-ish weeks when that happened. And then a week later, you were right around 37?
30, yeah, probably around there. 37, 38, something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So when you first went into labor, tell me what happened. Was it at night or in the morning, or what did you feel?
Yeah, it was probably early in the morning. Okay. I just had felt, cramping. Mm-hmm. It wasn't real bad, but, so we stayed home for a little while because, of course, we didn't want to be in the hospital all that time. And as they progressed, I did what everybody does, call the doctor, when there's certain space apart. And, then you head to the hospital, and that's what we did. Mm-hmm. So, and like I said, I mean, the labor progressed and I had dilated 10 centimeters, so I was fine that way. But,
I just didn't come down.
They said that you wouldn't fit through my pelvis. That's what they had said to me. Mm-hmm. So they ended up, they tried forceps, they tried the vacuum thing. That's why the baby pictures of you have two black eyes and a cone head. Yeah, you were in bad shape.
Did they say your pelvis was too small? Because isn't that like a misconception now?
Okay, my belief is because I was on bed rest all that time, mm-hmm. okay, and I wasn't active, because doesn't your pelvis like open up or something? Don't you have...
it can. That's why we talk about the importance of staying active, during your pregnancy and especially during your labor, staying active.
Because you were only 6 pounds 10. It's not like you were a big baby. You were 6 pounds 10 ounces. And Jenna, I had no problem with you. And you were bigger than she was. Yeah, so it wasn't like later, with the pregnancy with Jenna.
Yeah. So that's something. No, it's good that Jenna brought that up. So yeah. So that's something that we talk about. That's sort of a myth that a lot of people, it's just kind of something you have to understand. So like, it doesn't necessarily, big babies, the weight of the baby, the size of the baby's head can play a part in like not being able to fit through, but it's much more important the way that the baby is positioned in your pelvis. So if a baby's head is nice and flexed, like their chin is nice and flexed towards their chest, and they're coming down at that angle, and their head down, obviously, mm-hmm. and turned in the right way, that angle is a lot smaller than if a baby is like, you can just think about this. I think you guys can see me still, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Just think about like this part of your head is a bigger diameter than like this back part of your head. So that's what we talk about with how important baby's position is in there, because I see that all the time with women coming in and laboring, and they have what we call OP babies, and their baby is, that's what happened with Ryland and Walter. They were both mm-hmm. OP, and mm-hmm. they're just hitting against that pelvic bone. Right. So that could have been what happened with me. And yeah, maybe the prolonged bed rest did play into it. I just didn't spin like I needed to spin.
Mm-hmm. And I also had a epidural with you, whereas Jenna did not. So I know that you said that can be a problem as well.
Well, and it doesn't necessarily, maybe not a problem, but it's an intervention,
mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So tell me about that. So when you got to the hospital, you were laboring. Was that your plan to get an epidural with me, or was it just kind of like...
Oh no, my plan was to do it completely naturally.
Okay.
But as the gynecologist told me before, he said that's not something you can make a decision about prior to actually being in labor. So I learned my lesson. Like, oh no, I'm going to do this naturally. He was like, let's wait and make that decision at that time.
Well, he's not all the way wrong. He's not. He's not. That's somewhat. I can argue against that for sure. Mm-hmm. But yes, with labor, I think his point is you can prep a lot, but labor hurts like heck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
mm-hmm.
and it's easier for some or it's not that it's easy, but it's easier to get through than for some rather than others. Mm-hmm. And I think the time length goes into
that has a lot to do with it. Right. Yeah.
And we'll talk about that when we talk about Jenna too, because stark difference between the time
Right.
you were in labor.
Right.
And that makes a huge difference as well. Okay. So you got an epidural. Do you remember like how many centimeters you were when you got the epidural?
No, I don't remember that.
No idea.
No.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
No.
So
Yeah.
you got an epidural. Probably you progressed till you were 10 centimeters and then you started pushing. And what happened? Did they have you push in all different positions? And
yeah, they had me put, I mean, I was on my back,
Yeah.
and like I said, the gynecologist, she was, she used the forceps, she used the vacuum. I actually literally had a nurse sitting on top of me trying to push the baby out. I mean, she was
yeah,
literally.
we don't do that anymore either.
Yeah, thank you. Because that was not very good. I was like, do you realize I'm a person here?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
So
No,
that
that's
was
actually really dangerous. That's an old school practice. It's called fundal pressure.
Ouch.
Yeah, not fun. You think that they used to think to do that, to push, on the top to like try
Right.
and guide the baby down. But it can be, I mean, we talked a little bit about a placental abruption. That is really dangerous if your placenta tears off of your uterus, especially during labor. So, they found that like it's not such a good idea to do this fundal pressure. For one, because it can be dangerous. For two, it's also not super comfortable, as you are probably aware.
Yeah.
So definitely don't do that anymore. That is an outdated practice. Okay, so somebody was pushing on your belly. You were doing a bunch of different positions, and I just didn't come down. And then you said after 2.5 hours, they told you.
Yeah, they basically said they basically said the baby's not coming out. We got to do cesarean. So they took me in and did a cesarean.
And were you allowed to stay awake?
Yeah, I was, because I had the epidural for some reason. I mean, I don't know how long they last. Maybe they put more in or something. But I mean, I remember being conscious, but obviously I didn't feel the bottom half of my body. Yeah. So,
Yeah. So what they do is probably this. It's I think it's a little bit different dosage and medication nowadays that they do. But yeah, if you have an epidural line, they use the same line and they just give you a like denser kind of medication when you go in for surgery, because an epidural numbness is a lot different than than what you want to be for surgery. I don't know if you can even remember that, but your epidural is definitely a lot less dense than what they dose you up for surgery, because they have to actually cut into you when you're having surgery. All right. So then, so we have a C-section. Did you have any complications afterwards where you were bleeding a whole lot, or kind of?
No. I mean, other than obviously, you're a lot worse off after a C-section. You have a lot more pain. You were pretty bruised up. You had jaundice. Yeah. And so they had you under the lights, and they had you in the NICU. So obviously my main concern was and it's funny because, and I don't remember all of it, but I do remember that, they would call me and they would say, okay, you can come down and feed the baby. And I'd like take my little pillow and like do my little, cesarean shuffle and walk down there and then after a while, for some reason, I remember they told me that for a while I had to stop nursing you. I had to pump for a little while. And I don't exactly remember why. I don't know if they needed to know exactly the amount of fluid that you were getting or what. But you were in the hospital for I was in the hospital for 7 days, and then they told me I had to go home because the insurance wouldn't pay for it anymore. But they had to keep you, I think, just a day longer. And that was that. And then, after that, you were fine. You did well, and everything was fine. So,
good. I was going to ask about, so the pumping thing, they had you pump in the hospital. Was that only for a day or two? Or?
Yeah, it was not very long. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I wonder if maybe your milk hadn't come in or something, and they wanted. I
don't exactly remember why, but I just remember them doing it because I told you that I really didn't like pumping. I never did, and you were the kind of baby that you would have nursed all the time if you could, you were you were easy, and
Yeah.
nursing worked really well for me, so
Yeah.
Jenna, not so much. But you
Yeah.
were one that, like I said, would have nursed. I would just nurse you to sleep, and you were easy that way. So
Well, it's funny because I feel like I haven't even really talked a whole lot about it on my story or my platform, but Ryland is certainly much more of a bottle, but a very distracted nurser and much more of a bottle baby. And Walter was the opposite. He's always down to breastfeed. I had issues with my supply with him, but he was just like you said, I would like me, I would nurse Walter to sleep. No big deal. He took it every which way he could. And Ryland is like, no, I want it for a few minutes and then I want to go do something else.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Very distracted.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, Mom, let's go into Jenna's birth now. And let's talk about Jenna's pregnancy. So, for those of you who don't know, Jenna and I are 6.5 years, almost 7.
Yeah,
no,
about
I guess
7 years
7.
apart.
7 years
7,
apart.
yeah.
7 years apart. So it's quite a little while before you had another baby. So can you go back to when you were getting pregnant with her? If you had any other issues getting pregnant, or if you had any losses at that point, any additional losses before her or anything like that. And let's talk about Jenna. And Jenna, I'm going to let you. I'll ask questions too, but I'm going to let you lead and you ask questions if you want to ask questions, because this is all about you now.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about your fertility issues, because I know you had a whole lot of issues getting pregnant with me.
Right. Yeah. See, that was the crazy part to me, because like I said, when I miscarried, I'd gotten pregnant right away as soon as I stopped using birth control with the baby that I miscarried. With Liesel, same thing. Okay. When Liesel got to be about 3, we decided to move from New Jersey to North Carolina. So we're relocating. So we relocated, and then I started a new job, and I couldn't get pregnant right away because of insurance, all that kind of stuff. Well, then we decided, yes, we want another baby, and we started trying. Now, at this point, I was actually doing the basal thermometer, where I could tell where I was ovulating. I don't remember if I did that with you, Lise. I can't remember exactly, but I know I did it with Jen.
Right? I think you said you did in the beginning.
With Jen, or with you, I don't remember that. I don't remember. But with Jen, I definitely know I was doing it because I wasn't getting pregnant, which was a surprise to me because, 2 times before I tried and it worked fine. No problem at all, right?
Yeah.
So I was doing it. I was doing whatever you're supposed to do. You take temperature, it goes up. You have sex, and then you're supposed to get pregnant, right?
Yeah.
Okay. It wasn't working. And I mean, this went on for a year.
Yeah.
Okay. It was a year. And I had gone for my annual gynecological appointment, and I brought all my charts to my doctor, and I said, I'm trying to get pregnant. I can't get pregnant. Look, these are my charts. And she noticed right away. She looked at them. She said, oh, you're not ovulating every month. And she could tell from my charts. I didn't know what she was talking about, but, she could tell from my charts. So apparently I wasn't ovulating, all the time. Well, I did finally get pregnant with her, because at that point she said, how long have you been trying? I said, well, for a year now. And she said, well, if you don't get pregnant soon, you either need to go on fertility drugs or, you're not going to have a baby. And your father definitely didn't want me to go on fertility drugs, because my friend because he didn't want twins or triplets. So he's like, no, Liesel's going to be an only child if this doesn't work.
Oh, no.
So, but luckily, actually, believe it or not, at that appointment, I was pregnant, only a couple weeks pregnant, and I didn't know it. In fact, I had a mammogram, and, luckily I told them I was trying to get pregnant, so they put the lead apron on you, because they don't want the radiation to affect the baby. So yeah, I did get pregnant, and Jenna was exactly the opposite of you. I never had a bleeding episode. I was active the entire time, literally. And what they told me was, because you miscarried the first one, because the second one, you had lots of bleeding episodes with her, and you had to have a C-section, we don't want her to get too big. We're not going to let her get too big. So they were going to induce me because of that. They were afraid that was the reason that I couldn't have you vaginally.
And how old were you at that
37
point?
37 at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, because your birthday's in June, right? And my birthday's in February, right? Though I just turned 37. So, I knew what day she was going to be born because we had, set up a time. It's like, okay, we're going to be here at 9:00 in the morning or whatever time they told me, 7:00 in the morning. And we'll start the Pitocin. So, I mean, literally the night before I was up in the attic, I was dragging down all the stuff, clean, the nesting instinct, we remember that, Jen, when Jenna Liesel went through the nesting episode, painting and cleaning and everything, right?
I have super nesting.
So, I mean, totally the opposite. And I go in, they start the Pitocin, you walk around a little bit, you do all that stuff. And actually, I kind of had planned on having a epidural. There was no time for an epidural.
Okay, so go back.
Okay,
so let's go. You said you got induced.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a morning induction. You came in.
Right.
And they started the medication. You walked around for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And you said it went really fast. So what time, do you remember what time they started?
You know what? It's funny because I went back to your baby books and I actually recorded in the baby books how long my labor was. And with Jenna, it was 7 hours, the whole thing. With you, it was 22 hours, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's very normal. First labor versus second labor, for sure.
Although the doctor did say to me, excuse me for a minute, Jen, that it was almost like I was, because there had been such time between the pregnancies.
Yeah.
That to my body was almost like it was a first time pregnancy. Because,
I was about to say the same thing. Yeah. Since it's such like a spaced out two pregnancies, it's like your body just kind of starts over or forgets or I don't know, but yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, we see that happen too. It kind of, I feel like it kind of either goes, you trend towards that, or it's just a normal, second pregnancy. Things go quicker. But yeah,
right. That's true too. Yeah, yeah. But that pregnancy, like I said, was, I mean, in fact, I had been having contractions, and I had one really, really strong contraction. And the L&D nurse was in with me. And I remember saying to me, oh, I go off at 3, I wish and she had been with me all day, sweetest woman in the world. And she was like, I really wanted to see your baby born. And I had a really bad contraction. And I said, I'm ready to have this baby, because when you feel that urge to push, it's literally every muscle in your body feels that urge to push, and I'm like, I'm ready to have the baby. And she's like, no, honey, it doesn't work like that. One contraction isn't going to do that. I said, this baby's coming. The baby's coming now. And she's like, oh my goodness, and I think I went from like 4 to 10, like in one contraction. It was like something crazy. And she was like, don't push, because I don't have the doctor here yet. So I'm like, sorry, it's like, you can't stop it, So they managed to get him in there like just in time. And, Jenna was born. Boom.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that about not pushing, because when I had Tiffany on a couple weeks ago and talking about her birth with Callan, she said the same thing. She was like, I've learned my lesson to never, ever tell a woman not to push.
Right.
Because you literally.
You can.
How can they not?
Yeah. It is every muscle in your body pushing that baby out. It is just literally every muscle. So, and that's why it's so crazy to me, because you think that your first pregnancy should be the easier ones. And as you get older, it's going to be more difficult. In my experience, it was totally the opposite.
Yeah, nah. That's usually the easier. The more babies you have, usually the quicker they come. And
yeah. Yeah. I'm honestly surprised you didn't have any problems in your pregnancy or anything, because you were 37 and that's like kind of old, right?
Thanks,
Don't
Jen.
offend anybody. I know.
No, just like, that's why you had so many like Right. That's why you had so many fertility issues, right? Because you were
Right.
older.
Yeah, definitely. Right.
Yeah.
And like I said,
Yeah.
that's what they said. They said, you're not ovulating every month,
Right.
But I mean, my mother, her last baby was born at 44. I mean, she had, and actually she didn't have her first child until Gary, I think she was 27. In those days, that was late to have a baby, 27.
Oh.
Well, let's go back to when Jenna was born. So you had a VBAC with her.
Right.
How did you feel afterwards? Like, were you going into it thinking that you were probably going to have another C-section with her? Or were you like,
I didn't know, honestly. I wanted to try. I mean, the doctor, they give you that option. I don't know if they still do that, but they had said to me, do you want to try to have, and of course what does it have a lot to do with the scar, right? If you have a scar that's horizontal, you can't do it if you have a vertical scar. You can do it if you have a horizontal. So obviously, my scar is horizontal, so I could do it if she weren't too big and I didn't have the same issues. But honestly, literally, I felt like $1 million afterwards, because with your pregnancy, first of all, I had a epidural. So an epidural, you can't even feel the bottom half of your body, right? And you feel, and I was going at it for 22 hours. So I was exhausted, I felt horrible. With Jenna, I had so much energy. I mean, I literally, I remember the nurse saying to me, at one point they wanted me to move from something to something. And I'd push myself. She's like, slow down. You just had a baby. And I was like, I have so much energy. I mean, I really did. The difference between a C-section and a vaginal birth for me, was a 180.
Mm-hmm.
I had so much more energy after the vaginal birth than the C-section,
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. Well, you had a easier birth with me, but I was a tougher baby, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's what I always say. Liesel was a tough one to have, but the easy one to keep. Jenna was the tough one or the easy one to have, but the tough one to keep. Yes, you were definitely a tougher baby.
Okay, so wait, I want to ask about that too. So did Jenna, I know, because I kind of remember that she was a tough baby because I was 7, I guess, at this point. So, I kind of remember. And those of you who don't know Jenna, listening, like Jenna also now is like the most chill person ever.
Yeah,
like she's not a spaz or anything, anything like she was as a baby. But yeah, so Mom, do you think she had colic, or do you think she just liked to cry? Or what do you think?
I think she was very determined.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was looking in her baby book, and they said one, and it's funny to look back and because you have memories over the years, but then if you look back, you had recorded this stuff when you were going through it. And the word, I think it said something like, give one word to describe your child. And I said, determined. I mean, if she wanted something, she wanted it, and she was going to get it no matter what, so even as a baby, and she was, determined to do what she wanted and get what she wanted. And, it's funny because everybody thought Jenna was so shy around people. Remember? And we were like, really? Because around us, she was always cracking us up, and she was always like, the life of the party and stuff, and other people would tell us that, oh, I've never seen a child that shy, so.
Not so much. I feel like you're not really that shy anymore, Jenna.
No.
Nah. I'm a little better now. Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, well, before we close, let's talk about breastfeeding. You kind of talked a little bit about breastfeeding with both, but let's talk about breastfeeding with me and with Jenna and the differences. And if you, had any struggles with me, if you had any struggles with Jenna.
I never had struggles with supply or anything like that. That was, and the situation with also my work situation was different. With you, Liesel, I was home. The job I was working for, I got laid off, and I had 13 months off with you. Okay. So I was home the entire time. And you wanted, like you said, with Wally, you wanted to nurse. You were easy, you just, and for me, nursing was wonderful because I never had to worry about bottles. I never had to worry about preparing anything. It was
Yep.
just, it was always ready. So that was great. And I weaned you at about 13 months because I had to go back to work. And the only problem I had, I do remember getting mastitis at that point, like when I was starting to wean you and stuff. But other than that, really no problems. The only problem that I had with you was you were allergic to milk, so it was like getting close to your first birthday, and we gave you a little ice cream because I don't know if you remember Uncle Mike at his birthday was 2 weeks before yours.
I don't remember when I was a year old. No.
Yeah. Well, you remember Uncle Mike though, but his birthday is a couple of weeks before yours. So we had an ice cream cake. So we it's a couple of weeks. Let's give her a little ice cream. And you broke out in hives. You've always had a lot of allergies. So, so we knew that we couldn't go with, once I weaned you, we couldn't give you like milk.
Yeah.
So we had to give you soy formula. Jenna, basically at around, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, kind of like Ryland is doing now. She's like, no, I'm not interested in this nursing thing anymore. I have no interest whatsoever.
Yeah, that's exactly how he's been lately. I've been pumping, so like he's fine. He's still getting breast milk, and we're just doing the pumping thing. And he still nurses fine at night when he's not distracted by anything, and he's sleepy, and he'll nurse just fine. But yeah, kind of the same deal. He just is like, meh. I want to do other things. I don't want to sit here. I'm bored. Like I want to sit up and watch my brother run around.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Jenna, she was like, nope, I'm done. I'm fine.
Yeah.
And I vaguely even remember not using a bottle for too long, like going to one of those cups with the 2 handles because that's what she wanted.
So did you use formula or did you pump?
I had to have used formula because you can't give a baby milk until a year old. So I must have gone to a formula at that point.
Right.
Yeah. And those of you wondering too, I'm like halfway, I think, lactose intolerant. I have issues with milk, but I'm not like allergic to milk anymore.
Yeah.
I was going to ask too, when was I okay after that? Because eventually you started giving me milk.
Right.
Yeah.
Because this is the way the doctor told me to do it. He said, give you a bottle of soy formula with a 1/4 teaspoon of milk in it for 3 days. Mm-hmm. After 3 days, increase it to 1/2 teaspoon of milk and keep doubling it every 3 days so that you would build up the tolerances for milk. And that's how and honestly, if you want to know the truth, I think you're right, Lise. I think, you probably shouldn't be drinking milk because, it's not something that you...
Definitely doesn't. I mean, especially when I drink straight milk, it definitely doesn't agree with me. I like cheese too much, though, to like completely.
Yeah, right. Something.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, that's hard. I like to just like completely give up cheese because cheese is so delicious. But yeah. All right, cool. Well, I wanted to ask. I had one question that I thought of. So you said that recovery was a lot different with a vaginal birth versus a C-section with me. How was it different? Were you just not as sore, or were you bleeding less, or were you just, you felt like you could move around, or how was the recovery, like the second time?
Right. Just because the first time it was surgery, I was recovering from surgery, and recovering from, and especially abdominal surgery. I mean, years ago when I was 22, I had my appendix out. So I had abdominal surgery at that point as well. Yeah. So, surgery is far tougher to get over than just a vaginal birth. I mean, I really, I'm sure I of course bled with both of you. I don't know that one was worse than the other. And I don't really remember ever having any complications, other than, you're bleeding for a while and eventually it stops. So I don't remember that. It was just because it was surgery. It was much more difficult to get over. I was sore. I remember having to walk, half bent over, for a while, until, and of course, when you have a new baby, it does, okay, maybe your body is telling you, ow, when I get up, it hurts and I don't want, but you have a baby and every instinct is, I need to take care of this baby. This baby is more important than me, so that's what it is. But with a vaginal birth, I felt great right away. I really did. I mean, it just, if my first pregnancy, if my first birth had gone that way, I would be like, wow, I wouldn't have had any fears about it at all, even though, I mean, obviously it's painful, but, the recovery. And it's funny because, I always say that you forget the pain, until you get the first labor pain of the second pregnancy. Then all of a sudden, like the memories flood back, like, oh, I remember this.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not very good.
You block it out.
Yeah. But I mean, at that point, what can you do about it? But
Nothing.
yeah,
except persevere.
That's right. That's all you can. I mean, you have no choice, right? But thank goodness the Lord gives you that ability to forget, because no one would have any other than one child, right? We'd all be
totally
only children.
And I mean, I think I said this in my birth story with Ryland, maybe, I think. But yeah, I totally experienced that with him. Just, I mean, when that first one hit me, it's like, oh yeah, I forgot about this.
Right, exactly.
This is going to happen. Or even just, I mean, it's kind of crazy because I remember with Ryland, I don't remember it as much with Walter, but like I remember with Ryland, it being so bad. And like, I'm in so much pain and this is so horrible. And being done with him and him being born and being like, oh my God, there's like absolutely no way I'm ever going to do that again. That's terrible. And then probably a week after that, I was like, I mean, I'm probably not going to have a third baby, but like, I was like, okay. It truly goes away that quickly.
Yeah. Because I still have the text after you had the baby. You texted me, I'm not having another one. This is it.
Yeah.
After Ryland.
Yeah. I know.
We're scaring Jen though now.
No, yeah, I know.
Yeah, really.
It is kind of crazy though. And I mean, I will say, I mean, I'm not trying to say like my labor's worse than anybody else's labor out there, but like I had 2 horrible, like super bad back labors.
Right. Yeah, that I never had. Right. Back labor I never had.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that too. You never had all your contractions were in the front?
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I mean, I physically remember thinking there was something on the wall. And I remember holding on to it. I mean, I thought and it was some kind of bracket or something. I swear I could have pulled it out of the wall. I was just, because,
weird.
Because, the what's the Lamaze classes that you go to and stuff and the breathing, then none of that worked for me. It really did not. I just, none of it worked for me. And I just could not really breathe through them. And maybe I, wasn't a good student or whatever, but it didn't work for me for sure.
You're talking about with my birth? You took like Lamaze classes beforehand?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's super common for people to go to birth classes. Even, I have people say that after they take my birth class, say, I only used one of your tips. I could only hold on and remember one of your things during transition when it was so bad because like the pain is just so overwhelming.
Right.
That's all you can think about.
Right.
Yeah. I've always thought about that. Like, yeah, it's awesome to take birth courses because you get all this education. But when it comes to the tips, like be a ragdoll, relax. It's like when you're actually in the moment, you don't think about that. You're just like thinking about how much it hurts. And I mean, I don't know personally, but that's just what I can imagine, that like all those tips kind of go out the window. And
I think that I needed more education. I mean, again, that's all they offered back in those days, is Lamaze. That was it. But I think that if I could have learned to have tried to relax the rest, because even just, having edited your birth courses and looking at stuff, I was like, wow, I wish I had known that then, I really wish I had known that because, back in those days, you were lucky that you got birth courses. My mother's generation, basically, they put you to sleep and, the father woke up and, or that you woke up and they told your father what they had, It's like that's the way things were in those days. So certainly things were better for me. But today, everybody is so educated and you get a lot of different perspectives. People didn't talk about this stuff back in the old days,
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's, it's just so much better. And like you said, when I was reading your stuff, I'd be like, if I knew this, I think I could have, it could have been so much better for me then, but
well, good.
Definitely.
Thanks for the promo, Mom.
I know I was over here talking about how it's like, oh, those tips won't even matter, but
No.
I'm sure it's not for everybody. And I really also love advocating for yourself, because I feel like in the old days that was not very well known. back then.
And you didn't dare do it. The doctor, you listened to what the doctor, he was God. You listened to what that doctor said. Okay.
Right.
You never questioned the doctor. My mother still, as a senior, and when we used to go to the doctor, she would never question the doctor because that's the way you were raised. The doctor knows it all. You know nothing.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. It's just, and that's not to say that I know some very, very smart, well-educated doctors.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I'm not denigrating doctors at all. Right. For sure.
Course, but it's very important to advocate for yourself and to ask questions.
And be educated about the process. Right. Because with education, that takes away the fear. Because so much of it is the unknown and not knowing. You need to be educated about the process for sure.
Right. Well, great. Well, I think that's a great way to wrap it up.
Okay.
Thank you guys for coming on. Thanks.
Yeah.
Mom.
Okay.
Thanks.
Happy 2020. This is the last episode of 2020.
Thank goodness 2020 is over.
I know. Right?
Praise the Lord.
I think it's going to maybe December 31st at 11:59 the clock's going to tick to 2021 and just like everything's just going to go back to normal and everything. I doubt it, but
at least we'll be closer to normal, right? That's for sure. So
okay,
that's right. All right. Well, thanks, guys.
Okay, we'll see you.
Yeah,
thank you.
See you.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Are you looking for birth education? Did you know that I have 2 fabulous birth courses that are super affordable? Well, I do. Head over to mommylabornurse.com/podcast to take a short quiz to see which birth class is for you. When you purchase either birth course, you'll have full access to it forever. And that means it will never expire and you can access it throughout any stage of your pregnancy or for any subsequent pregnancies that you have. You'll also gain free access to my Facebook group, linked to the class where you can ask questions about your pregnancy, share your birth story after you give birth, read other people's birth stories, and get to know other members who are in the course. There is also a money-back guarantee, so if you are at all unsatisfied with your purchase, please send me an email at hello@mommylabornurse.com for a full refund. There's really no risk to signing up, and I promise you will learn a ton about what's to come when you give birth. As a listener of this podcast, you automatically get 20% off any purchase if you use the code PODCASTLISTENER. I've had tons of moms just like you enter these birth courses and have fabulous, wonderful, empowering births because they feel so much more educated about what's to happen. So if you are at all curious about birth education, again, I encourage you to go to mommylabornurse.com/podcast and use the code PODCASTLISTENER to save 20%. All right, so that is it for this episode of the Mommy Labor Nurse podcast. You probably follow me on Instagram because that's probably where you came from. But if you don't, head over to Instagram and follow me at mommy.labornurse for more. That is certainly where I am most active. I also now have a separate Instagram for just this podcast, so I encourage you to follow my second account at mommylabornurse.podcast as well if you want podcast updates. Again, that is at mommylabornurse.podcast. As always, you guys know that I also have a website where I have tons of articles all about pregnancy, birth, breastfeeding, newborn stuff, and more at www.mommylabornurse.com. I want to hear more from you on how much you love this episode of the podcast or how you think I can improve. So leave me a comment on one of my pictures, send me a DM, or send me an email with all the love. All right, guys, I will see you same time, same place next week.